All right, welcome back to another episode of Music is My Mantra. Today I have a very special guest, Kyle Fleming, on the show. Kyle has a master's in music therapy and is a board certified music therapist and assistant professor of music therapy at Wartburg College in Waverly, Iowa. His clinical work focuses on child and adolescent mental health within a trauma informed framework, and he teaches classes and workshops on trauma informed care, clinical musicianship, and community arts practices. So, welcome. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'm super excited to have you because I actually connected with you originally on LinkedIn. I found some publication that you had on there, and you were the very first music therapist that I found, but we've, been going back and forth, obviously, a little bit busy with summer and all that. So I'm glad we finally get to do this.
Yeah,
So one thing that I noticed that, you have all of this experience in your field, hands-on, but also studying it from getting your master's and board certification. So I'd like to know a little bit about you, but before we jump in, can you give us a little history lesson of how music therapy came to be?
sure. I mean, depending on how far back you want to go, human culture has used music in a variety of ways for our entire existence. But I think what we understand as music therapy now kind of has its roots in around the World War I, World War II era when nurses who were working with soldiers who had injuries and were coming back from battle found that they were much calmer and much more receptive to medical interventions and medical care when they were being sung to and when they were being comforted. And so we have this anecdotal idea of music can heal and music can calm. And it wasn't really until the 1950s and 60s when we started actually doing academic studies on that topic. So the first book written and published about specifically music and healing actually comes in 1918. It's a little pamphlet called, I think it's called Music and Healing or Music and Medicine. The book that most music therapists would know was written by E. Thayer Gaston in 1964 called Music in Therapy. And that kind of launched this idea of music therapy as a treatment modality. There were only a few schools in the US who taught it at the time, and now it's expanded into, I think we just crossed 10,000 board certified music therapists in the US with over 70 programs, undergraduate and graduate programs in the US. And we've had just a number of high profile incidents that has really shown the clinical use of music and how it can heal across a variety of spaces: mental health, physical rehab, dementia, and memory care. So it has its roots, yes, in antiquity, but really started to form as a profession probably in the 1950s and 1960s.
Very cool. Thank you for that. That's what I've read just briefly. I haven't studied this in depth like you have, but I think it is really interesting because, I definitely didn't consider music to be a viable career path. Let's just put it that way. When I
Sure.
was like going into school to college and, after I got out of college, I was like, okay, now I can start my career as a musician, as an artist, and I've done marketing to help balance that out. But, there's a program that I was briefly involved with right before COVID shut things down, where it was musicians on call. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but we would go and practice or play songs for people in the hospital. So it was a nonprofit volunteer organization. And that was probably the first official introduction that I had into music therapy. But before that, I would play for my grandpa when he had dementia. And, I personally, I could see that really had an effect on him. But then later learning that actually it is a whole field, I had no idea, So tell us a little bit about your story and your background. What brought you into this field?
Sure. I trace a lot of it back to being involved in music pretty heavily as a kid. I think I started piano lessons in second or third grade. And then I was in the orchestra in fourth grade, and the band in the fifth grade, and the choir in the sixth grade. Sung at church a lot, played at church. I learned guitar at a summer camp. Like music was just played such an important role in my life personally for self-expression and organizing my thoughts. So I knew whatever I wanted to do as a career, I wanted music to be a central focus of that.
Yeah.
My mom was a social worker growing up too, worked for the
Okay.
Department of Family and Child Services in Minnesota. And I was drawn to that as well. I wanted to work in some sort of mental health capacity. I wanted to work with teenagers because I just enjoyed working in like youth spaces. Like I said, camp counselor. I really enjoy playing with little kids and leading games during our Bible camp over the summer.
Cool.
And so I knew I wanted something to do with that. My original plan was actually to double major in music and psychology and see if there was a way to blend those together.
Yeah.
And then that's when I discovered music therapy. I realized that what I was planning to do already existed as a field. And after job shadowing a music therapist in South Dakota and really enjoying that experience, I knew that this was the path I wanted to be on. And actually enrolled in school where I teach now is the rival of the school I was going to go to. So
Oh.
it's I kind of switched camps a little bit, but I wouldn't trade it for a minute. Since starting this program here and now coming back to teach at it, it has just been a whirlwind. It has been everything that I've wanted it to be and more. So
So, out of working with patients and teaching, do you find that there's many similarities in a sense of like, yeah, go ahead if that makes.
yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities. I think the biggest similarity is in both of these fields, we're on a journey of discovery and we're on a journey of learning new things. In the classroom, we're learning what does it mean to be a therapist? What does it mean to lead sessions with music? What does it mean? Like all of this technical stuff. And then in the therapy space, it's a discovery of who we are and
Mhm.
what we stand for. I was just having a discussion with one of my classes yesterday, kind of rejecting this idea of we go to therapy to fix things, rejecting that idea, and embracing more of an idea of we come to therapy to discover and to have a better understanding of what's going on, especially in mental illness and mental health.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily fix depression. We don't necessarily fix trauma, but we do learn more about it. We understand what it means for us, and we learn how to cope and how to manage and how to exist. So that journey of discovery on both sides is just something that really excites me.
Cool. Yeah, that's that. I would imagine that that is a good check-in process. Like if you ever find yourself trying to solve something more so than just be open-minded, then I can imagine that that would be a really different outcome even in your sessions, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think that's what scares a lot of people from therapy too is, well, there's nothing wrong with me. And it's not necessarily that anything has to be wrong with you, but it's like I said, that discovery. Let's learn something new about ourselves. Let's unlock these different areas of our lives that maybe we've held shut or closed off for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's really cool. Do you find that working, especially if with like the trauma informed either patients or just in that space, that it requires a lot more skills than your average? Like maybe you can break it down for the audience. Like, what would you consider trauma informed versus just like regular music therapy?
That's a great question. And I mean, my underlying belief is that even regular therapy should be trauma informed, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think it comes down to mindfulness and intention.
Okay.
I think what differentiates music therapy and music therapists from even musicians on call, for example, is that the music therapists have specific training
Yeah.
in the emotional processing and the ability to shape the music.
Mm.
Music on Call is a wonderful program, and the people that I know that are involved with it see a lot of benefit, and the patients that are involved with it express a lot of benefit.
Mhm.
So I try not to poo poo on music programs that are doing healing and therapeutic work. I think that's super beneficial. And I don't want to say, don't do that, whatever. It's just that music therapists have a deeper knowledge and understanding of the healing process and what's going on. And a lot of that comes with being mindful about the music that you choose, being intentional about how you're framing different experiences rather than going in, oh, you like country music, here's a bunch of country songs.
Yeah.
The music therapist might say, you like country music, here's a song that also resonates, if we're talking end of life care, that resonates with your transition into whatever comes next. So let's talk about that grief. Let's talk about that regrets. Let's talk about what sort of legacy and message you want to leave for your family. So there's that intentional piece that goes with it too.
Yeah, whereas musicians on call, it's more about just providing, like, some joy, some maybe a break of the days of sitting in a hospital or what have
Yeah.
you. Yeah, thank you for that. That was pretty that makes sense. What in your experience, what was it like going through that process? Like, when you first started learning about music therapy, you already had an interest in both of these topics, obviously, like, you knew it's what you wanted to do. Was there anything that really surprised you when you first started learning more about the process of working with patients or setting up a session?
Yeah, I think the biggest transition that I had to make was sort of letting go of the music, I guess. Prior to all of the music that I had been making before had been it was either very rigid and prescriptive. Like choir, you had to hit all the notes and you had to hit them in the right way, make sure all your rhythms and your vowels and all of that stuff. So it was very rigid. You had a very specific idea that you had to go to.
Mhm.
Music that I was writing for myself, I had complete control over that.
Yeah.
So I had complete control over, here are the words, here are the chords, here's how the melody goes. And it was kind of hard those first few sessions to let go of that control
Mhm.
and to realize that the client also has a say in the music.
Mm.
Like, I may want to go in this direction, but they may not want to go that way yet or at all. And so we have to create a musical space where we're both happy with what's going on while still challenging you toward that discovery and toward that healing. I think it's a process that even today with my students, I see it's really hard to let go
Yeah, it
of
sounds
your
pretty
session
humbling.
plan. You spend so many hours picking out the songs and picking out the things, and sometimes it just blows up in your face. And so you just have to let go
Yeah,
and be in the
coming back to
music.
that process of discovery that you were talking about earlier.
100%. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So, from my understanding, music therapy is actually it can like, when you're in a session with someone, it can look very different, right? And that probably is that just reminded me of what you're saying, like, you can have a plan, and then it can get completely thrown out the window. So, when you are setting up a plan for somebody, like, knowing that you might have to just completely scrap it, what is something that you're thinking about when you're going into a session? I'm sure that maybe it would be different, based on how long you've been working with the person, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about that process.
Right. It all comes back to the why, I guess. Why are we having this session? Why am I meeting this client? Practically, that is the goals of the session.
Mhm.
So if I'm seeing somebody for issues with anxiety, as an example, even though my plan may blow up, my job is to come back to, we're dealing with anxiety. We're learning about anxiety. We're learning about the process of managing it. And so just having that clear focus, but also the why of, sometimes plans just never work. And
Mm,
so reminding yourself of the why of, why am I here doing this? Why is it important to be with this person in this moment? And just remembering the humanity of everybody that's there. That was especially hard with young kids who would curse me out and refuse to do anything.
yeah.
Just remembering that mean, they are kids and they've gone through some pretty horrific stuff that I will never know or fully understand.
Yeah.
And reminding myself that I am here to be a safe and stable person. That doesn't mean I have to accept the abuse, but it's reminding myself that the abuse is not directed to me necessarily.
Yeah.
It's directed to whatever is happening in this
Right.
person's mind and in this person's life.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, aside from being very patient, I can imagine, is how much of it would you say, like, obviously, the session itself probably doesn't look like something that, we could necessarily define, but when you're going into that with that why, it's like, are you thinking, okay, today we're going to try songwriting, or is it more like we're going to listen to music, or maybe a combination of all the things? Like, yeah, what does that look like?
Yeah, ultimately, it comes down to client preference, the objectives and the goals, and that sort of thing. Music therapy has, we call them four primary methods
Okay.
that we can use. Sometimes they're standalone, sometimes they're a combination. So those methods are receptive. So that's where you are responding to music in a non-musical way. So this is stuff like meditation. This
Mm.
is stuff like creating art or mandalas to music, even moving your body, having that embodiment sort of thing.
Cool.
There's recreative, so that's typically sing-alongs, jam bands, songs that already exist that we are performing in some way.
Mm.
Compositional, where we write our own music and have it in a fixed medium, whether that's a recording or lyrics or even notated. And then improvisational, which is just music that happens spontaneously,
Mm.
and we enjoy that music in that moment. Those methods are not, like I said, not standalone. Sometimes an
Right.
improvisation will turn into a compositional. We'll have some ideas that we want to hold on to and record.
Yeah.
Sometimes the receptive turns into a songwriting, turns into a compositional. So we listen to a song, we talk about the lyrics, and then maybe we rewrite it or
Okay.
we add a verse. Just kind of depends. With
Yeah.
my teenagers or my adolescents and kids, they didn't necessarily want to write anything,
Mm.
but they did want to musically explore.
Okay.
So that was a lot of improvisational. But even then, sometimes recording those improvisations and listening back and saying, what are you feeling here? Like, what do you hear in this music? What were you trying to express? And really get an understanding
Yeah.
of what was happening musically. So yeah, that's across the my folks who work in schools. There's a lot of recreative and instrumental play. My friends who work in dementia care, it's a lot of receptive and recreative, a lot of sing-alongs, a lot of listening and playing instruments along and stuff. So it
Cool.
kind of looks different wherever you go, but ultimately
Yeah.
those four methods
Okay.
form the basis of how we grow and how we learn.
Interesting. That's really cool. And I'm sure that there's different, like, those tie back to psychology.
Yeah, there's elements of that. Yeah, ultimately the roots of music therapy were sort of in a counseling realm. And then as we got away from hospitals and started seeing the benefit of music and music therapy in more spaces,
Yeah.
then it kind of the vision sort of expanded and broadened out.
Cool. So, would you say that music therapy can be for everybody?
I think it could benefit anybody who is interested in it. The clients that I work with personally are often people who are either intimidated by or have tried but have not benefited from more traditional forms of therapy.
Okay.
Just thinking of a trauma informed lens, sometimes our speech center of our brain shuts down when we're overwhelmed.
Mhm.
And so we can't talk about it. And
Yeah.
especially in cases of childhood trauma or childhood abuse, that abuse happened when there were no words for it. So
Yeah.
it can be really hard to talk about what's going on.
Mm.
And that's where music can kind of circumvent that speech center of the brain.
Yeah.
And then you can just bash it out on a drum. And that's just as good
Yeah.
as processing or talking about it or whatever.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And obviously, we talked about dementia patients a few times. So it seems like if you could categorize the different types of patients that typically you see, would you say that it is kids and then end of like later years of life?
Those are the stereotypical categories, yeah. Those are, I would say that makes up at least half of the clients that music therapists see, which is good and bad because those folks clearly benefit from music,
Mhm.
but from like a PR perspective, music therapy is only for kids. So why would I, as a mid 30s person, want to do that? And so a
Yeah.
lot of the advocacy is no, 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 you benefit from it too. Like it's not just sing-alongs and puppet shows and that sort of thing. It really is. We can get some deep, meaningful work done through
Yeah.
the music. It just requires an open mind and a bit of vulnerability that I think some people are not used to.
I know I've talked about it before on the podcast where even for myself, performing music has always felt like a way of therapy and self-expression, and that so many people have, told me at one point or another in my life, "Well, you're so confident, you're so good at it," but, like, I didn't start out that way, you know? It's and I did music growing up too, like, in church choir and band and stuff, and it's very different when you're just when all the focus is on you versus, like, a part of a group, and I think that there's so much that we can learn from the relationship between ourselves and music and how we use it, and so I would agree that, if anyone out there is maybe struggling with something that hasn't really they haven't been able to understand or break through or something, maybe this is a space that you can try and, you don't know what you'll learn, I guess, until you're
Yeah, absolutely. The number of adults that I hear say how they wish they had stuck with music and how they regret not continuing with piano lessons or not continuing in band. I think music therapy is a great way to get back in touch with that musical self
Yeah.
without necessarily, as I mentioned earlier, the rigidity of rehearsals
Mhm.
and lessons and that sort of thing. It's one thing to join a choir, it's another thing to just sit with another person and
Mhm.
improvise or
Yeah.
write songs. And so it's definitely a more unique, a more intimate setting that has just as much benefit as joining an ensemble, I would say.
That's awesome. Where would you instruct people to go to find music therapists that they can trust or, maybe their insurance takes it, maybe it doesn't, there's lots of ins and outs about that world I don't know, but yeah,
Sure.
where would you start?
Yeah, I would say the starting point for learning more about music therapy would be the American Music Therapy Association website, which is musictherapy.org, O-R-G. That gives you basic information about what music therapy is and what the training looks like. There is a search function where you can look for music therapists or music therapy programs, but that's only if board certified music therapists are members of AMTA. A lot of them are not. So if you want to expand that search even a little bit, the Certification Board for Music Therapists, cbmt.org, has a list of therapists who are current in their board certification. And all that board certification means is that the person has a degree in music therapy, they completed a clinical internship of 1,000 hours, and they passed a national certification exam. I think the pass rate right now is you have to get 80% on that exam in order to pass. And that's people who maintain the certification. You can filter by state. Sometimes international folks are members of these organizations. So you may find folks from Australia, you may find folks from Spain on this list. So if you're not in the US, you may have to look for the your national music therapy association. But folks in the US, that's where you would start, or even just a Google search of music therapy wherever you are. You can usually find some folks or find some places that have it.
Cool. Well, I know You've got lots going on, but you do some consulting as well, right?
I do, yeah. I'm a huge advocate of arts integration. I love the idea of the therapeutic arts in general, not just music, but also art and movement and dancing and drama. I think it goes back to what humans have been doing our entire existence is creating art and making art and being in community. And so a lot of consulting I do is how do we incorporate the arts into your spaces and even the trauma informed frameworks of what does it mean to be transparent about our policies? What does it mean to collaborate with people? Really trying to make places and spaces more inviting and more accessible to people.
Do you work specifically with different organizations or venues?
I mean, I'm happy to work with whoever wants to work with me. I find that I do a lot of arts collaborations with nonprofits. For a while, when I lived in Illinois, there was a suicide prevention nonprofit called Rattle the Stars, and I would be support them in various ways. One of those ways being they had a arts and music showcase that they did every year. And so I tried to come up with a set of music or create some sort of artwork
Yeah.
to be part of that fundraiser. Yeah, just really passionate about providing opportunities for kids and teens in the community. So even here in Illinois, I do a lot of work with our public library, putting on different programs. I led a guitar camp over the summer and had 15 kids who had never picked up a guitar before
Oh, that's awesome.
leave knowing 6 chords and having multiple resources and stuff. So just making the arts accessible in whatever way
Yeah.
I can.
I love that. I've definitely worked with other types of arts as well, different mediums when I was in New York, curating different spaces and stuff. And I think especially outside of the city, in the city, of course, but typically there's already a lot going on with the arts in the city, right? So I think it's these outskirts, like the fringe areas that you don't necessarily see that so much, but it's so important. And I think when you're working with a space and you want to bring art into it, there's usually like one or two people that, maybe have an idea, but they don't necessarily know how to do that. And if you were approached by a new space, what would be a few things to keep in mind that you would say, hey, like, this is a great idea, but let's just be aware of X, Y, and Z.
Sure. I think the big thing that to be aware of is just we're never fully sure what people are bringing into the spaces. Not necessarily physical things, but if we want spaces to be open and public and accessible,
Mhm.
that means there are folks who may have underlying issues that are undiagnosed or may have life experiences that they're still coping with, and they're bringing that into that space. And we should find ways for even folks with those experiences to be welcome and supported. What does that mean? Sometimes that means maybe we need to have a bit more supervision, just
Mhm.
making sure that everybody is safe.
Yeah.
Sometimes that might mean designated areas for people to work with, clear instructions. I hesitate to say kick somebody out if they're being disruptive, but even just knowing how to de escalate situations, to distract and redirect. Sometimes that requires a little bit of additional training. But yeah, and ultimately, in an artistic space, the focus should be more on the enjoyment of creation
Mm.
rather than having a good product, whatever good means. I find that is what intimidates people the most
Yeah.
is I would love to write a song, but I'm not a good songwriter. It's like, well, what does that mean? Like, no, you're not going to be Taylor Swift on the radio.
Yeah.
But if the song that you write expresses what you want it to express, that's a good enough song for me.
Yeah.
That's you've gone through the process and hopefully you've learned something and you enjoy something in the midst of it.
I mean, even Taylor Swift had to start somewhere, but she, at this point, she's been doing it for 29 years with a lot of
Yeah.
people to help her. So, yeah, you can't compare. I find that a lot too when it comes to singing, just giving like lessons to people. I work with a lot of people who have wanted to sing forever and they've just maybe never had a lesson or something like that. And it's like you just got to start. And these things, I think people think that we're artists are born with gifts, and maybe that's a little bit true, but I think a lot of it that you don't see is all of the hard work that goes into becoming an artist.
100%. And even what you were saying earlier about the confidence level
Mm,
of being confident to sing in front of people
yeah.
requires a lot of work too. I don't know if you have found this in your lessons, but I have found in a therapy context, the voice is such is the most vulnerable instrument
Like,
because it is tied to who we are as a person.
yeah.
And like it's just incredible the number of people who go, oh, I'll play whatever I want on the piano, I'll play whatever I want on a drum, but as soon as I tell them to sing, it just shuts down. There's
Yeah.
something so incredibly vulnerable about the voice, and it's my primary instrument, or was my primary instrument in college. And so even with that, sometimes being asked to use my voice in certain ways is pretty intimidating.
I definitely have noticed that, and, it's everything from breathing and, like, where people are holding tension to, like, the mindset that they are something that they're not or vice versa, and it's really interesting to see, I think part of just even being like a voice coach or teacher is expanding the imagination, right? Like so much of it is like, okay, imagine you have your voice is going like this. It's like
Yeah.
yeah, it sounds more like play, but that's really cool that that also overlaps in your therapy work. You see that too. Yeah. Do you make music for yourself still in between all of the different pieces of work and life these days?
Yeah, I try. I really try to. A lot of that music for myself lately has just been exploring new styles of music that I wouldn't necessarily bring into session or bring into class. I tell my students this and I try to practice it. I try to be really protective of music that's for me,
Yeah.
rather than music that is used in session, just because I've had it so many times where a song that I really enjoyed
Mhm.
and I thought this would be great in a therapy session, and then I use it and I use it again, and now that is a therapy song and I can't enjoy it anymore because I have too many memories and associations and stuff. So yeah, been trying to learn more folk music from Scotland and Ireland. That's
Oh,
kind of been my little obsession lately. So trying to learn more of that trad style. I'm also trying to get back into composing. So I'm working on a choral piece right now that I hope to have done in a couple of months and send it off to some people. And yeah, it's finding those, yeah, between clinical work and teaching and my 3-year-old daughter, there's not a lot of time to
yeah.
not a lot of time to make music, so I try to fit it in wherever I can. It's a little harder some days than others, but yeah, still trying to be in touch. I think that's the way to do it, is to stay in touch and stay focused.
Well, I can imagine just knowing how it's worked for myself. It's like if I get, too busy into like my marketing work or something, then I do feel like I lose that kind of, I don't know, it's a gift to me, like that this space that I get to create just for fun with no pressure or like taking care of my own mental health through playing music. So, do you find that as well in your experience?
I think back to early in my career being burnt out on music. It was just so much of my job that I would drive home from sessions in silence because I could not bring myself to listen to anything.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that had to do with those personal boundaries with the music. I was letting too much of my music get into my work. And
Yeah.
so trying to protect that for myself really helped with that. And it's something I try to tell my students too. Don't lose touch. The term music therapist starts with music.
Yeah.
starts with you're a musician and a therapist. And if you lose those musical skills, you may still be an effective therapist, but you're losing part of what makes you unique and what brought you into this program and into this field.
It's like you really have to be in touch with both sides, I guess. Yeah, which I can see where there would be a lot of pressure on both both sides for you. Oh, well, that's really cool. I'm ex- I'm excited that you're working on a choral piece. That sounds like composing and just, keep up the good work.
Yeah.
As yeah, I can imagine that. I know that takes time, but I think it's like you said, it's good to have some balance if you can, or integration, as I like to call
Yeah, it doesn't help that in creating my own music, I get too ambitious sometimes. And
it.
so I've been working on this one for a while and already feeling the need to scale back a little bit. And that kind of hurts me a little bit because my vision is this big thing and I want to see that vision, but also there's a deadline now, so I need to
Yeah.
get it done.
It's good to have a deadline for that reason, you know? I think
100%.
build on something that you create, but if you at least are able to finish it, a lot of people never get to that point of finishing something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You got to have that first draft before you can do anything.
This has been so great. Thank you for coming on today. I have just a few last questions, but before we go there, is there anything that you would like to share in your experience of being a musical therapist that we haven't covered today?
I guess the only thing that I would share is, thinking of thinking of the marketing and the PR of music therapy. These big stories
Mm,
are so great for advocacy for the field. One of the most recent ones is from about 10 years ago. Gabrielle Giffords, the US rep from Arizona,
mhm.
who was shot in the head at a political rally, had music therapy as part of her treatment when
Wow.
she was in hospital in Texas.
Okay.
And actually that because of the hard work that they did, she was a French horn player. So they brought in the French horn to help work on her fine motor skills and using songs to help her relearn to walk and talk and that sort of thing. And
Wow.
just the incredible acceleration of her healing
Mm.
because of that music therapy. It was something like 6 weeks or 6 months after that incident, she was already talking again, and now we see her still advocating and doing some incredible work. I love those big stories because those are great examples, real life examples of music helped in this way. But I'm also equally excited about the little victories, the little bits of movement. One story that I like to tell when I'm giving talks and presentations is about a young person that I worked with who an extensive history of abuse and neglect and
Mhm.
was actually on track to being moved to a more secure residential facility because we didn't think we could handle him or work with him. And then I did a free association exercise. So I played a piece of music and said, write or draw, whatever you want to do with it. And he ended up writing a letter to his mom as part of that process. Something about the music just resonated with him and allowed him to release all of this anger and all of this tension and all of this frustration. And it was just such a little thing, like talking with his treatment team later, just this little thing of he doesn't really talk about his folks, doesn't really talk about his family, doesn't really talk about his past. I said, well, here it is in a 4-page letter that
Wow.
he wrote in a session.
Wow.
And just that little shift was enough for him to open up in therapy more and
Yeah.
engage more in treatment. And instead of moving to a more secure facility, he ended up being adopted by a relative and
Oh,
moving out of state.
wow.
That's not a story that gets public
Yeah.
knowledge
Right.
because of all sorts of sensitivities. And it's not even it wasn't even a huge moment at that time either. It was
Mm.
just this little something about whatever was happening in that music was just enough to push him on a completely different path. And I
That's
think we
cool.
see that a lot in ourselves
Yeah.
using music. And so I guess that's a takeaway that I would like listeners to take is music could help foster these little moments and we should not shy away from them. We should lean into them and embrace them because we don't know. Journey of discovery, we don't know where that's going to take us. It could take us in a completely different direction than we would have gone otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds very cathartic. Yeah,
It was for this young man.
that's so awesome. No, thank you for sharing both of those. I actually didn't know about the first story. I grew up with some time in Arizona, so I'm familiar with Kathy, and that's really crazy that, you see people that have these amazing recoveries, and I'm sure some of them, just have stronger willpower than others, but that is really a testimony to, especially like bringing back that love of instrument that she had probably as a kid growing up. It's like, it reminds me of an episode that I did with a play therapist early on. And, this idea that music can be very playful. And so again, it comes back to what you were saying, of taking that pressure off to be perfect or performing in a certain way, and really just, you get to be the person that's holding the space, that safe space, which is really
Yeah.
so.
Love a good play therapist. I love the work that they do. It's just it's a kindred spirit to music therapy in so many ways.
Yeah, I could see that. And I didn't know that that was even really a line of work until I met her. So that was really cool too. And
Yeah.
it just reinforced all of these ideas that I've kind of found through my own life, the way that play and music can just get me out of a funk or a headspace or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. I always ask my guests if there's a song or multiple songs that have saved your life or changed your life in some significant way. So I would like to ask you, it might be a hard question. Some people have many answers. So
Yeah. Oh man, there are so many. Even earlier today, driving back from a site,
mm,
just thinking, how am I going to answer this question? How deep
yeah.
do I want to go? I mean, I could talk at length about the time I sat in on a choir rehearsal after a death in the family, and they sang a piece by Renee Clausen called In Pace, which is Latin for in peace or being in peace.
Yeah.
And it was a piece that I had performed with this choir in 2011, but only a few years before when we went on our European tour.
Okay.
And just to sing such a rich and beautiful piece in some of the greatest cathedrals in Europe and all these churches was just so incredible. But then I started, I could answer that way, but I started also thinking about just the moment that we're in and just trying to be, regardless of how you feel about what's going on, a lot happening in this world culture and a lot happening politically. And I've been really drawn over the last month or so to this song called When I'm Gone by Phil Ochs, Ochs. And I really love it because it resonates so much with. It's a song that I have the first verse pulled up, and the first verse goes, "There's no place in this world where I'll belong when I'm gone, and I won't know the right from the wrong when I'm gone, and you won't find me singing this song when I'm gone, so I guess I'll have to do it while I'm here." And it just, all of these verses in this song are all about, if I'm gone, I don't have a say in things. If I decide to leave or disengage or whatever, I can't be the advocate that I've always been. I can't help people in ways that I've helped them. Things might seem worthless and might seem like a waste of time, but while we're here,
Yeah.
let's get it done. And I feel like that is, at least in the last decade, has been sort of my life philosophy of I can't fix everything. I can't change things that are big and important to me, but I can change these little things.
Yeah.
So while I'm here, let's get the work done, right?
Mhm.
Let's do what I can.
Yeah.
And that just resonates so much in my work too of I can't change a client's past, but I can be with them in this moment.
Yeah.
I can't change the fact that they were abused and neglected as a kid, but I can be someone who is safe here in this moment.
Yeah.
And I can't do that if I decide to quit this job. I can't do that if I decide to any number of ways to disengage or not be part of life or society anymore. So while we're here, let's do the work. Let's make the world better. And so that's kind of been my theme song the last month or so. It's a good motivator, a good reminder
Yeah.
of the purpose of life.
That's really great. I'm gonna go listen to it after we hop off here. Thank you for sharing that and for the lyrics too. I think that's a really poignant message. Yeah.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
And it comes back to too the two stories that you were sharing with music therapy. Right. It's like you have the high PR story, and then you have the little ones that like no one will see, but you saw such huge impact and change in that person's life. And I think that is such a great way of looking at things. It's like we may not be able to be the person that is setting laws that will change things massively, but in our immediate community, we can really make a difference by being the person that shows up every day to, like you said, do what we got to do, right? So
Yeah,
such a good
absolutely.
reminder. Yeah. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Alrighty. Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you as a guest today. And for all of our listeners out there, I would love to hear what resonated with you, what was exciting. If you have any questions for Kyle, I'm going to make sure that all of his links and everything are linked in the episode links below. So leave us a comment. Let us know what resonated and what helped you. And if not, let us know what didn't. And until next week, thanks for tuning in today. Share this with a friend if you enjoyed it, and we'll see you later. Stay healthy, wealthy, and wise.
We're moving in close.